evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tez, and it's been a little while. This is our first show of 2025, and we're already basically halfway through the month of January. Um, so, just as kind of just general kind of catch up, it's been Christmas and New Year's, and just before either Christmas or New Year's, I can't remember now. We did the 2024 Ghoulie Awards. That was a hell of a lot of fun. It's always good to kind of take a moment and go back through some of the films from the last 12 months, because there's naturally going to be ones that you forget about until, it pops up on a streaming service, or if you own the physical media, you happen to be looking through your films, looking for something to watch, and you think, oh yeah, I really did enjoy that. And, it's a shame to not acknowledge those films that hit right with you. So I had a good time looking through some of the films that we reviewed and talking about the highs, mainly the highs, with the odd low here and there, just because that's just how it happens. They're not always going to be killer. They're not always going to swing and hit a home run. But we are back. So in general, what have I been up to since the last show? Mainly ill. Mainly having one form of a cold or like headaches or whatever. Just there's been some ailment or another recently, and to be honest, we had so I'd planned to record at the weekend, and then it just got away from me. Just busyness with just life, planning the wedding and all that. It just got away from me, and then I planned to record, I think yesterday. It just wasn't going to happen yesterday, and then I almost got curtailed today because about half an hour before going live, I suddenly felt really ill, and I just thought, oh my god, like I hadn't slept that well last night, and I found myself quite tired in the afternoon, so much so that I actually went for a nap, as in full on got into bed, and I felt so groggy after that. It turns out that during my sleep, my blood sugar seemed to have dropped quite a bit. So that's something I need to keep an eye on as to my blood sugar levels. As a man who has blood sugar levels issues in the past, hopefully in the past, but still got to keep an eye on them. I just felt awful, but thought I need to go ahead and do a show, and thankfully my fiance looked after me. Feel better now. I've had some food, and food always helps. Generally, the rule goes that if you feel poorly, have something to eat. Unless you've got food poisoning, and then that's just pointless. I digress. Outside of that, I haven't done too much gaming in the last week, but what I have gamed has been pretty much Space Marines 2. What I like about that is, while I don't necessarily know much about the lore, I've watched the odd video to kind of get the grasp of who the Emperor is, the God Emperor, and just a quick overview of the Horus Heresy storyline. But when playing a game, there's a lot of names of planets and characters that I just sort of go over my head a little bit. Not to say if you haven't played it that it's obtrusive and that you wouldn't be able to play it because you don't know Warhammer. Like, I know nothing about Warhammer. But when it's during like the dialogue and the cutscenes, I'm crap with names. I tend to find with like fantasy shows, especially like let's say Game of Thrones, that I could watch a whole season and get to like the last couple of episodes before I realise what some characters' names are. Because if their names aren't like Greg, John, Sarah, something like that, then I tend to my brain just sort of goes, I can't remember what they're called. It's bad, I know. So I have had that sort of thing where I'm slowly getting the gist of the characters' nuances, but the combat is really cool and badass. And what I like about it is it's kind of, I suppose, similar to something like, kind of like for me with like a football game or something like that, or a sports game, or a UFC, WWE to an extent, where you can just drop in for 10, 20 minutes, have a couple of matches, and then drop back out without it being too much of a time commitment. Space Marine is just like that. Drop in for a mission, go to this point, defend or repel or turn on the power, and when you do that you've got hordes. It is quite rinse and repeat, but when the gameplay itself is good and engaging, then that doesn't really necessarily matter. I saw a guy I watch on Instagram who does gaming, but he also does like gym PT stuff. But it's mainly like the gaming side of things, like the collecting side. I haven't watched him play any games, but he just he buys tons of games and films from CEX, various variants and whatnot, just because he likes to collect and whatnot, and he makes a profession out of it. So fair enough. And he had kind of said that when it comes to like repeating a game when you've completed it, someone had said like, well, what's the point? You finished it, so you know the story. What's the point? And that has always been my mentality with single player games, and I prefer single player games. Why would I want to replay it when I know the story and I play games for the story? I'm a very narrative focused gamer. And he'd said like, well, yeah, I get that, but if you want a good narrative, that's your focus. You watch a film, watch a TV show. And there's nothing wrong with that being in a game, but a game ultimately is to be fun, to have enjoyment, to elicit a reaction. So if you're getting that reaction from the game and you're enjoying yourself, why would you not want to do that again and again? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it does make sense. So I am thinking, are there going to be some games that I think, you know what, I am actually going to try and revisit that. I am going to try and play that differently. I'm not necessarily saying my mentality on gaming is completely going to change overnight. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, Space Marines 2 I'm having a lot of fun with. I haven't had much opportunity to jump back into Silent Hill 2. I have found I'm in such a dark area at the moment. I'm in the prison. And whenever I have had a spare bit of time to play it, it's been like kind of broad daylight. So one, it's not really the ambiance for playing it, and two, I can't really see what's going on the screen without messing with all the settings and making everything look overblown. Making excuses here to not be scared, but that's kind of where I am gaming wise. But this is a Ministry of Horror. We talk horror news. We do some horror reviews. We sometimes have a featured presentation. Now, in the coming weeks, I will plan to do a 2025 preview for horror, the films that have been announced that haven't yet come out. We haven't got that tonight on the basis that I've just been so on and off ill and busy. I kind of figured getting a show out is better than no show. So I have a very belated review from a film that I saw almost 2 weeks ago now. Christ. We're going to review at the top of the show Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers Nosferatu. And then the other films we've got to review are, I think it's a Sky original, which is normally a bit telling, but not always the case. A film called Getaway with Nick Frost. And then also the recent Lauren Lavera, I believe it's an Italian, giallo-esque horror called The Well. They're coming up a little bit later on. But first off, I think we've kind of covered the vast majority of everything. I mean, you can't see it here, but I've reorganized one of my kind of bookcase shelf things. I have actually, while it's right in front of me, finally finished Dark Tower Book 5, Wolves of the Calla. So if long-time listeners of the show know I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but the Dark Tower is one of those series that it the idea of it sounded great, but it just never really hit with me back in the day. And I know if you've listened to more recent episodes of the show and I've discussed Dark Tower, I've probably said all this before, but hopefully we're going to have some first-time listeners here and there. I tried a while ago reading The Gunslinger. I thought, okay, it's fine, nothing really happens. Drawing of the Three, I thought, okay, story's kind of good, but in the grand scheme of things, this big quest to get to the Dark Tower, and a lot of it has been spent lying on a beach half dead. That was my initial thoughts, just not to bury the lead, that's not necessarily how I feel now. And then The Wastelands I did enjoy a bit more, but again, I found the opening part of it with this fight with this mechanical bear a bit drawn out. And I think the struggle that I had was I thought, oh, God, there's 7 books at that time. It's now 7.5 or 8. I kind of felt like, if this is a journey to the tower, is every step of it going to be so drawn out? Because I'm one of those people, I just, if there's a destination, let's get on with that destination. I don't need bottle episodes, filler episodes, like of a TV show. Back in the day when something like Lost had 20 odd episodes a season, you could guarantee at least 8 of those episodes aren't really essential to the overall story. They might have character development and backstory and have some importance, but in terms of the overall quest, the main storyline didn't do it for me. And I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I love the Monster of the Week episodes of things like X-Files and Buffy, Angel. But when there's an overall quest, that's my jam. So a little while ago, I kind of figured, you know what? I want to retry. I'd found a really nice book set for like £35, something like that on Amazon or eBay actually, for all 8 books altogether. I figured, okay, I love my books. Let's collect that. Let's get it. Red Gunslinger, much better second time round. I mean, it's still a very, very short read. There's not a huge amount to it, but I felt a bit pacier. And I think where I'd watched the odd videos on lore in the intervening times that had got my interest up a little bit more, I kind of figured, let's go for it. And I know the general gist of what happens in the overall story, not necessarily when things happen, but certain character moments and the finale, because it had been fairly lambasted over time. Someone's at the front door, according to Alexa. I jumped into Drawing of the Three, and that was much better the second time round. Like some of the Dark Tower series to this point hasn't been uber horror. It's very much more fantasy western. But but Drawing of the Three, there are certain moments with Henry Dean's death, the lobstrosities eating the face off of another character, where you get those little horror elements that I hadn't really necessarily noticed before. I didn't reread The Wastelands because I felt like I enjoyed that enough. I didn't need to go back through that, and I'd kind of thought, okay, I'm back on trying. I'm now into enjoying The Dark Tower. So rather than spend time rereading the third book, which is fairly lengthy, let's jump into book 4. So I had the Audible already and the Kindle. So I had 3 versions of book 4. And I really disliked it. For a long, long time, I really struggled. I kept starting and stopping that book because I just found the whole flashback tale of young Roland going to this town, having this Romeo and Juliet story. I found myself having such a struggle with it. But I knew that it's one of those books where the majority love it, favourite in the series. Some don't understand the appeal, and I very much found myself in that part. Until around the 2/3 point, when it really just clicked with me. And I thought, okay, I really, really dig this, really, really love it. Listening to it, the Audible, it was a great, great production. So, anyway, book 5. Started it just early December. I'd have hoped to have finished it in December to be one of my films from Goodreads for my little kind of like yearly target. Didn't manage that, unfortunately, but I have today finally finished it, and favorite in the series so far. I think where I am quite a fan of modern King, in terms of even on a larger book, things just feel a little bit pacier to older King. And it's not just necessarily Dark Tower. I know that this was 2003 and the earlier books were like 95, 80s, whatever. But I certainly found that it was his more modern writing that I do quite enjoy. I know it's not for everyone. So I'm quite keen to continue and jump into Songs of Susanna, or the Song of Susanna. I'm probably going to try and read a couple of small things in between, because I know that's another lengthy book. I think Wolves of the Calla might be the largest in the series, probably behind The Dark Tower. But yeah, I just thought I'd drop in that 5 out of 5, or in my scale, let's use the scale on here for Ministry of Horror. I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10 for Wolves of the Calla. Really, really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Anyway, without further ado, because I've been blathering on for 15 minutes, let's jump into the news and then we can get to the reviews, and then I can go to bed because I feel awful. This is the news. Ho, 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 ho. Oh, it doesn't seem to be doing my Friday the 13th sound. Oh. That's peculiar. The news music plays, the other ones don't. I'll have to look into that. Wouldn't have thought I'd have to test that, but hey, here we go. Anyway, all of my news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Great site for your horror news, featurettes, all that good stuff. They quite often do little snippets of news on X. Always good to give them a follow. And I should actually mention, speaking of X, follow the show, Ministry_Horror on X, TikTok, Ministry of Horror. We have finally set up an Instagram page. There's not really anything on there yet, but if you are on Instagram, search for Ministry of Horror. It's got the familiar logo. Give us a follow. I'll follow back because I'm a nice guy. Anyway, let's jump into the news from Bloody Disgusting. The news from Friday just gone. 6 new horror movies released this week, plus the Goosebumps return. John Squire's write-up. So, first off, an investigative documentary that dives deep into one of Hollywood's most intriguing what could have been stories. Jorge Romero's Resident Evil hit VOD this past Tuesday. In 1998, Constantine Films set out to bring Resident Evil, the legendary horror video game, to the big screen. They enlisted Jorge Romero. I should call him George A. Romero. He's not Italian. The visionary director who redefined the zombie genre to adapt the project. But despite the perfect pairing of horror's greatest minds, Romero's vision for Resident Evil was never realised. Now, for the first time, director Brandon Salisbury's documentary uncovers the hidden story behind the project that captivated fans and the horror industry alike. George A. Romero's Resident Evil delivers an immersive, stylised experience, weaving together archival footage, newly uncovered documents, and fresh interviews with key personalities. Taking inspiration from documentaries like Jodorowsky's Dune, Salisbury crafts a compelling narrative that revisits the people and the creative vision behind this unproduced adaptation. Through candid interviews with industry insiders, the doc brings to light the enduring mystery and the ambitious spirit that could have redefined the franchise's journey into Hollywood. So I believe, didn't George A. Romero direct a trailer for Resident Evil 2, like a TV spot? I may be wrong on that, but I'm sure that he was involved in a Japanese TV advert, possibly, for Resident Evil 2. But I mean, it's kind of a match made in heaven, George Romero and Resident Evil. I'll have to give that a watch when it is free. Next up, director David Fincher supervised the new 4K restoration of Seven, which was released on digital outlets as well as 4K Ultra HD physical media on Tuesday, January 7th. Ooh, I'll have to give that a look. We're going back and doing it in 4K from the original negative, and we overscan it, oversample it, doing all of the due diligence, and there's a lot of shit that needs to be fixed, David Fincher said of this brand new 7 restoration last year. He continued, because there's a lot of stuff that we can now add because of high dynamic range, streaming media is a very different thing than 35mm motion picture negative in terms of what it can actually retain. So there you are, a lot of blown out windows that we have to kind of go back and ghost in a little bit of cityscape out there. Written by Andrew Kevin Walker, the film follows a pair of detectives on the hunt for a serial killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his motive. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman star in the 1995 serial killer thriller with Gwyneth Paltrow and Kevin Spacey. Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of meaning to rewatch 7 for a little while. I've kind of slowed down on purchasing physical media as it does get expensive, and I do have a wedding to pay for. Let's just have a little look-see. My internet is being hella slow today, so not entirely sure what is going on. Doesn't appear to be returning anything. I know this is great podcast audio. Have a quick look at my phone. 7 Steelbook. Ooh, that does look tasty. That does look tasty. It's a 4K and it's in a Steelbook. Yeah. Okay, let's keep an eye on that. Anyway. So moving on. I mean, it's a great film. It's one of those things where, like, I knew about the ending before I was watching the film because it was during that time when big thrillers would come out and have these twist endings, and then the endings would be lampooned, satirized, and you then know that, in pop culture long before actually seeing the film. Sort of didn't really necessarily ruin it knowing where it was coming, because the journey itself was still pretty damn good. But yeah, definitely want to give that one a rewatch. Next, a documentary that delves into what we're talking about, into the UFO phenomenon like never before. The Alien Perspective from award-winning filmmaker Dean Alioto is now available on VOD outlets. With insights from NASA, CNES, Oxford, compelling first-hand witnesses, and even the possible viewpoint of extraterrestrial visitors, the film features exclusive interviews with futurist Michio Kaku, comedian and UFO researcher Dave Foley, New York Times investigative reporter author Leslie Keane, NASA deputy scientist of TESS program Elisa Quintana, and more. The team at Captured Pictures previews the UFO UAP discussion has been hotter than ever, with Congress hearing on UAP claims last month, and now with the onslaught of mysterious drones over New York and New Jersey. Could this be evidence that we are not alone? Yeah, I mean, I've not really read too much into the released documents by the Pentagon or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, when I was younger, growing up, the whole Roswell was interesting. This whole, did something actually happen? What's there? What's being held at Area 51? Like, it was interesting to me then. But now I think I've just not really looked into it, because I kind of figure, unless someone shows me something that looks genuinely like, well, that can't be anything man-made, or it can't be, CGI, then I just haven't really taken an interest in it. Not to say that I think we're alone in the galaxy, but at the same point, I kind of think, well, I haven't seen anything to tell me, that all of these perspectives on aliens are true. So maybe I need to watch the Alien Perspective and understand their side. Don't know, probably not. Moving on, the Disney Plus series Goosebumps is back with a brand new second season, and the new season is titled Goosebumps The Vanishing, now on Disney Plus and Hulu. The series regular cast for season 2 includes David Schwimmer, Anna Ortiz, Sam McCarthy, Jaden Bartels, Elijah M. Cooper, Galilea La Salvia, and Francesca Knoll. Additionally, Arjun Athail is Samir, Alois Payot is Hannah, Christopher Paul Richards is Matty, and Kyra Tatoi is Nicole, 4 teenagers who mysteriously vanished in 1994, becoming a central secret to the present-day characters. Disney Plus series is, of course, based on R.L. Stine's iconic series of books. So here's the official synopsis. The story begins with Devin and Cece, fraternal twins adjusting to life with their recently divorced dad, Anthony. When the duo discovers a threat stirring, they realise that dark secrets are among them, triggering a chain of events that unravel a profound mystery. As they delve into the unknown, Devin, Cece, and their friends, Alex, CJ, and Frankie, find themselves entangled in a chilling tale of 4 teenagers who mysteriously vanished in 1994. Books that inspired season 2 include Stay Out of the Basement, The Haunted Car, Monster Blood, The Girl Who Cried Monster, The Ghost Next Door, and Welcome to Camp Nightmare. I don't know if I recognise any of those titles. I think they might have been later Goosebumps books. Like, I remember Goosebumps, like the original, I want to say like 12 or so books that came out. I always enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the original TV series. I think the recent one I thought was like decent. I thought it was okay. I wouldn't necessarily say I thought it was brilliant. It had some good acting in it, like Justin Long. But I don't know. It was very much kind of on par with the newer versions of Are You Afraid of the Dark, where it's like, it does decent enough kind of story. Like, it's horror light. Which, at the end of the day, the original ones were as well. And then next up, what we've got reviewed later on is described as a comedic slasher movie. Getaway from director Stefan Haas was released in theatres last month, and it's now streaming only on Shudder or Sky Cinema. Written by and starring Nick Frost, the film follows a family on their summer vacation to a remote island where they discover a serial killer is on the loose. Unfortunately for them, the locals have no interest in helping the stranded family. I'm super hyped that Getaway found its perfect partner in IFC Films and Shudder to bring the film to North American audiences. We can't wait to invite everyone on this killer trip with the Smith family to the unwelcoming island of Svalta, said Haas. Getaway is a laugh-out-loud comedy that pours several buckets of blood onto a family's sweet vacation in Sweden. This hilarious thrill ride will stir up laughs and scares in equal measures, said Shudder's Emily Gotto. Nick Frost revs up his horror comedy expertise with the support of a strong ensemble cast and Stefan Haas' playful directorial touch. Aisling B, I can never pronounce her name. Aisling Beer. I'm just gonna read it how the letters are. Sebastian Croft and Macy Ayres also star. Next, I don't need to talk more about that right now because we're going to be reviewing it later on. Next, a bachelor party weekend transforms into an intense nightmare in Bird Eater. And Dark Sky Films brings the Australian psychological thriller exclusively to select theatres today. A bride-to-be joins her fiance's bachelor party in the remote Australian outback. As the festivities spiral into beer-soaked chaos, uncomfortable details about their relationship are exposed, turning the celebration into a feral nightmare. Directed by Jack Clark and Jim Weir, their feature has been described as a horror thriller that represents a visually striking and daring debut from this Australian duo. Shabana Aziz, Mackenzie Fernley, Ben Hunter, Jack Bannister, Clementine Anderson, Alfie Gledhill, Harley Wilson, and Caroline McQuaid star in Bird Eater. Never heard of it. It sounds kind of interesting enough, and I'll be honest, Australian horror generally hits quite nicely. It's generally quite nasty, what I have seen. So I'm kind of interested. And I think that's it for the new horror films. This next one is more about screenings of an art project. We'll move on. Puppet Master, Ginger Dead Man, and more full moon props are up for auction at Prop Store. Write-ups from Alec DiVincenzo. B-movie maven Charles Band is cleaning out his closet. Over 150 items from the Full Moon archives are up for auction at Prop Store. Own a piece of horror history with screen-used props from some of Full Moon's most popular franchises, including Puppet Master, Ginger Dead Man, Evil Bong, Subspecies, Killjoy, Demonic Toys, Baby Oopsie, and the Prime Evils. Additional lots include prototypes, maquettes, hand-painted poster artwork, original concept art, rare promotional materials, mock-ups for unproduced films, illustrated comic book pages, original one-sheets, and more. Several items date back to Band's days running Empire Pictures with such cult classics as From Beyond, Intruder, TerrorVision, and Tourist Trap. Bidding is open now and ends January 22nd. Yeah, I mean, there's some images on Bloody Disgusting site of the Puppet Master things. There's the Ginger Dead Man, which is god-awful. I'm going to have a quick scroll down. There's the Demonic Toys, Jack in the Box Jester. Demonic Toys is an odd film. I think we watched that on a watch party a little while ago. Is that Baby Oopsie? I don't know what the hell that is. Parasite 2 poster. That looks pretty cool. From Beyond. From Beyond it's a weird film. It's good, but it is weird. Okay, some really strange artwork. So there's some cool things available. So if you're a fan of Empire Films or, Full Moon Pictures, I was hoping to see what Subspecies props they had. Then definitely go check it out. I mean, that's some cool stuff right there. So moving on. Borderline poster. Samara Weaving stars in violently romantic comedy. John Squire's write-up. So, what have we got here? A fan favourite here in the horror world, Samara Weaving will be next seen in the upcoming thriller Borderline, and the official poster has been released this morning. The poster advertises the upcoming film as being from the minds that brought you Cocaine Bear and producers of Barbie and Promising Young Woman. No release date or trailer for Borderline at this time. Stay tuned for more. Eric Dane and Ray Nicholson also star in director Jimmy Warden's movie. Warden wrote the film, will be making his directorial debut. In Borderline, described as a violently romantic comedy, A bodyguard protects a pop superstar and her athlete boyfriend from a determined stalker in 1990s Los Angeles. The writer of Cocaine Bear is back with another twisted tale. A star-obsessed sociopath and his fellow inmates escape from a mental institution and invade the home of his 90s pop superstar. He just wants to be loved. She just wants to survive. The cast also includes Alba Baptista and Jimmy Fails. I like the sound of that. I mean, Samara Weaving is great. Everything I've seen her in, she does pretty well. I mean, the Cocaine Bear aspect, or I suppose the connection with the writer. I know Cocaine Bear was popular. I wasn't really that fussed with it, to be honest. But the setup does. I mean, I know it's set in the 90s, but it does sound very 90s, and I do like that. I like that aspect. It sounds like it's probably got maybe a bit of a thriller element in it, and you know that I like a good thriller. The world needs more good thrillers. I'm going to be keeping an eye out on that one. A shower. Let's have a look at some gaming news now. Bend reality in single-player sci-fi horror first-person shooter Deficit. Write-ups from Mike Wilson. Developer Item 42, the creator behind the classic mythology-inspired co-op shooter Perish, have announced a new single-player FPS in Deficit, which is currently in development on PC via Steam. Described as having an emphasis on chaotic close-quarters combat, Deficit trades in tomb raiding for a little sci-fi that harkens to something out of Event Horizon. Deficit casts you as a corporate espionage freelancer for hire. Your latest assignment, from one known only as the Client, has you stealing the reality-shifting interpolator from the sprawling research labs of Project Sidereal. Project Sidereal is housed within Hadrian's Wall, a maze of concrete warrens and liminal installations policed by the seasoned officers of the Oversight Task Force. The interpolator allows you to open wormholes to find your way around obstacles, but in the process will have you entering the strangest frontiers of reality. Apart from bending reality, you'll need to deal with and avoid the Oversight officers, the various mechanoids found in Hadrian's Wall, as well as just whatever comes out of the wormholes. Luckily, you do have some weapons at your disposal, though as mentioned, the emphasis on close quarters combat will force your hand. Things such as hammers, screwdrivers, and bricks are your main go-to, though you'll have to have access to pistols and SMGs at certain points. No release date has been announced as of yet. So there's a trailer. I'm just going to pop it on mute and scan through it. Though, as I say, my internet has been spotty at best. Graphics look pretty decent. I mean, it's a first-person shooter, so no doubt I'll get motion sickness. And yeah, it looks kind of creepy. Right, there's some combat. I'm just going to scan through. Okay, right, yeah. It looks decent, quite melee heavy. Fine. Okay. I imagine that'd be a Steam game, but possibly consoles, not sure. But keep an eye out. And then next up in the news, another little piece, little nugget for the movie fans. Freddie Prinze Jr. confirms Ray and Julie aren't the main characters in I Know Legacy sequel. John Squire's writer. The 90s slasher franchise, I Know We Did Last Summer, returns to theatres on July 18th, with both Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. coming back to reprise their roles from the original movie and its sequel. But are Julie James and Ray Bronson the main characters, or rather legacy supporting players to the new cast of fresh faces? Speaking with Scale Talk podcast with David Miniatures, I should say, Freddie Prinze Jr. reveals it's more of a case of the latter, so don't go in expecting a full-on Julie and Ray sequel movie. Director Jennifer Caitlin Robinson just took such good care of Love's character, Julie James, and my character, Ray Bronson. They're not the leads of the movie by any stretch of the imagination, Prinze Jr. explains in his new chat of the show. He continues, Caitlin Robinson made them such a powerful pushing forward of the other cast. It's not like, oh, here's the Ray and Julie movie that we deserve. That doesn't even make sense. That guy's dead, so it has to be a new generation. And the way she sort of laces us in there with them is just beautifully done. The script is wonderfully written. Billy Campbell, Chase Sue Wonders, Madeline Klein, Sarah Pidgeon, Tyreek Withers, Jonah Hua King, Lola Tung, Nicholas Alexander Chavez, Austin Nichols, and Gabriette will be among the fresh faces joining the franchise's legacy cast members. Jim Gillespie directed the original 1997 slasher, I Know We Did Last Summer, which was written by Kevin Williamson and based on Lewis Duncan's novel. The film spawned sequels in 1998 and later 2006. Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. only came back for that first sequel, so the new movie will mark their return to the saga after 27 years. Jesus. That is quite something. I mean, I've still not watched the third one. I know the general consensus is you are not missing anything. It is not good. But I do have the trilogy box set, and the first two are fun. Like, the first one's great, and the second one is a little bit silly, but it's got some good moments in it. It's got some good kills as well. I think this is interesting, and it's probably a good idea to confirm early doors that they aren't returning as the stars, because I think returning fans are always going to be disappointed if the returning actors are in it as more of a cameo or a smaller supporting role. It's always a bit of a knock. I remember when Terminator Dark Fate announcements were coming out about that, and it had been announced that Edward Furlong is returning. He's returning to film some scenes. Now, if you read into wording, you can get the idea that it wasn't going to be a big role, because if it's a late addition to a production and it's filming some scenes, it gives you an idea that it's not going to be a substantial appearance. But even so, what we actually had, and obviously Edward Furlong is much older, and what happens with his character in the film is that's part of its story, and I didn't mind that. But when you're told that an actor is returning to a role and it's just their likeness digitized, it's a bit of a piss take. So I think it's smart to just get it out there that, you know, what they've done with our characters is great, but this isn't their film. And that does make sense because the guy that they were dealing with is dead. So end of, doesn't need continuing. I like that. I think that's smart. And then finally, I know that the Gruff will like this news if he hasn't noticed it already. And to be honest, I didn't assume something had been done, but I did think this looked better on the 4K Blu-ray. So that is that weird Ian Holmes CGI in Alien Romulus has been changed for home video release. John Squire's write-up. The most controversial aspect of Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus last year was the use of late actor original Alien star Ian Holmes' likeness in the film, with a digitally resurrected Holmes playing an android named Rook, the same model as his character Ash from Ridley Scott's original classic. The effects work for the uncanny cameo, well, it left much to be desired. Turns out even Fede Alvarez wasn't happy with how the digital necromancy in Alien Romulus turned out. As he explains to Empire, the effects were retooled for the home video release. We just ran out of time post-production to get it right, Alvarez tells Empire. I wasn't 100% happy with some of the shots where you could feel a bit more the CG intervention. So for people that react negatively, I don't blame them. We fixed it, he continues. We made it better for the release right now. I convinced the studio we need to spend the money and make sure we give the companies that were involved in making it the proper time to finish it and do it right. It's so much better. And yeah, he is right. When I watched the home release, I did think that it didn't look quite as Happy Valley and jarring as it did in the film. It does, you know, it looks more like a robot rather than this just what we saw in the cinema, which was just initially I thought it was jarring because it's Ian Holmes' character, but not his character, but his appearance and voice is a bit weird. But it did just look strange. So that, yeah, I'm quite pleased that they did that. That's a correction in the right way, I would say. And Ghouls and Fiends, that is it for the horror news. That was the news. Ho, 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 ho. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I would play the review music, but it's not working. So it's time for reviews. And as per usual, your boy has has got the images for the films, but was too damn eager to get ready with the show that he hasn't prepared the images for on-screen use. So I'm going to do some slow, dawdling, rambling to find the images, although apparently I haven't saved them, which is a bit of a joke. Ministry of Horror. Babada. Oh, they're all in stupid file formats. Okay, so we're not going to have on-screen graphics for the films we're reviewing. Ah, dearie me, everything. This is my own fault for not testing things that I assumed I don't need to test. But the first film we're going to be reviewing is the 2023 Italian Gothic horror The Well, co-written and directed by Federico Zampaglione, starring Lauren Levera and Claudio Garini. So as with all the reviews that we do here on Ministry of Horror, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the plot of the film, the highs, the lows, and then I'm going to give it a score out of 10. If you at any point either disagree with my scores or agree with my scores, jump onto social media, give us a comment. The show goes out on Spotify, and I think you can add comments on Spotify, so be sure to populate that. I guess it helps with algorithms and it helps the show grow, and that's important. So, The Well. Lisa is sent to a small Italian village by her father, a renowned restorer, to restore a damaged painting in the collection of Emma. Lisa meets biologists Madison and Tracy and their guide Tony on her way to Emma's home. The group parts ways in the town of Sambuki, but Lisa's work is soon complicated by nightmares, cryptic warnings from Emma's daughter Julia, and pressure to finish the job quickly. Okay, this is an odd film. Now, Lauren Levera is great in this. Like, she is one of those actresses that kind of just has it, that has star power. It was evident from the first appearance in Terrifier 2, where that just kind of helped elevate the film. I mean, obviously the production values were better than the first film. The gore was arguably even more insane, if that's even possible, which it was. But whilst the film did have a plot, a lot more so than the first film did, it was also helped by Lauren Levera, and to a lesser extent, Elliot. Can't remember his surname. Her brother in the film. You know, he's all right. He's not a very good actor, but he's got charm. Lauren Levera is very good in it. Now with this, the things that I liked, it had, and not just because Lauren Levera was in it, but it had that look of a kind of color palette similar to Terrifier. Like, Terrifier has this image where things are a little bit kind of like the contrast is almost slightly off, a little bit kind of smoky. It has this real kind of 90s feel without putting on like a 90s video VHS filter or anything like that. It's hard to describe, but it has this particular look. The Terrifier films all have it, to different extents, but Terrifier 2 and 3 certainly have it. Terrifier 1 had it as well, to its credit. This film does also have that kind of, I suppose, slightly muted color palette with a bit of harshness on the contrast. Not to get too much into like terminology, and I'm probably using the terminology very incorrectly, but it has an interesting look to it. But it doesn't take long for things to go kind of strange. And this is a film which is only like an hour 20, hour 25. Does in places drag quite noticeably, where the focus on this film is the gore, well above the story. There is potential for an interesting story in there, but it is just nasty. Like, it's like, not to keep using the comparison because of Lauren Levera, but it's like the Terrifier nastiness, but that's off. That's, you know, off pace, or played off against Art the Clown being so playful and joyous with the nightmares he's creating. In this, Lauren Levera's Lisa goes off to this old house to restore a painting that's been covered in like black paint or soot or whatever. Needs restoring very quickly. Time is of the essence. But then the friends that she meets along the way, that they become good pals, and then they part ways. You go off camping and then get taken. Madsen, Tracy, and Tony end up in these cells. That in the middle of the cells is a well. The title of the film, The Well. And then this large pot-bellied guy with like kind of clown makeup on staggers in, and he is pretty menacing. And he does violently assault, attack, maim characters one by one. So for gorehounds, it is pretty visceral. There's arm breaks, there's dismemberments, there's like eyes being ripped out with clawed hook, like not claw hammer, but like a clawed hook thingamajiggy. It is violent, but it's more just unsettling. And I guess it depends. If you're just an uber gorehound for gore's sake, that's your thing, that's fine. You might enjoy that. For me, it was just like, oh man, this is just painful screams for like 5 minutes while pieces of their body being ripped apart just violently for the sake of it. That wasn't for me. As the story progresses or tries to, we get a bit of an understanding of what is going on, sort of, before it then leads into this odd finale where we get a bit of a time jump, and it very much felt like this cult-ish storyline was thrown together haphazardly. I mean, the music in it was okay. It definitely, I knew it was an Italian film before seeing, you know, who the director was. I hadn't noticed that in the opening credits, but just the sentimentality of it did have this almost modern take on a supernatural giallo. Like, I kind of appreciated that, but I didn't really enjoy it, to be honest. I didn't find myself having a great time with it. I'm going to have a quick look at what my notes were that I initially put down as my gut reaction score. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking now. I'm going to give The Well 4 out of 10. Apologies that if you're watching the video, there's no artwork on screen. The images I saved weren't in a format that my software can use. But The Well, Lauren Lavera, 4 out of 10. Unfortunate. If you are a gorehound, though, bump that score up by like 1.5. You'll get something out of it. Not for me. And then next up, as mentioned earlier on in the news, 2024's Getaway is a British comedy horror directed by Stefan Haas and written by Nick Frost, who stars alongside Aisling Beer, I think that's how it's pronounced, Sebastian Croft, and Maisie Ayres. The film premiered at Fantastic Fest on 20th September 2024 and is scheduled to be released in the United Kingdom on Sky Cinema on 10th January. So the setup is a family on holiday in Sweden travels to a remote island to take part in a peculiar holiday tradition. So, in terms of modern Nick Frost horror, I know he's having a bit of a moment in terms of more straight up horror releases. We did that Taxi film, Black Cab, which was, he was good in it, but the film itself wasn't great. Thankfully, this is a lot kind of closer to the comedy aspects of horror, because that is where he shines. He can be menacing. He's also incredibly charming and lovable, as people who have watched Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, etc., will attest. But in this, he's back to kind of playing that role where he's like well-meaning but a bit dithery. He's got a loving relationship with his wife Susan, and they've got their 2 teenage young adult kids, Sam and Jesse, going off on holiday to this Swedish island. The setup is a little bit weird. Like, why would a family go on their family holiday to this really obscure remote place that has a horrible history on the island, where outsiders had come, there'd been a huge massacre, and we're coming up to the anniversary of that event. But this film really does work in 2 halves, and well, it's a comedy film, and the second half of it has horror elements, but it is essentially like a dark comedy. Think kind of like Sightseers. Um, the pairing of Nick Frost and Eileen Beer works brilliantly. Like I always find her quite funny. She's very endearing, and her and Nick Frost bounce off each other really well. Their back and forths are hilarious at times in this film, and the dynamic with them and the kids, where the kids are just getting on the dad's nerves at times, especially the son, Sam, I believe. But it's turned out to be great casting. I'm not familiar with either the kids in this, but the casting in this is brilliant. When it gets into the horror side of things, it's just fun. It's just an enjoyable film, kind of from start to finish. It doesn't necessarily ever veer too heavily into the horror, or by that I mean it doesn't necessarily take a turn into darkness, like you could say a period in the final third of Shaun of the Dead goes for a bit more out and out horror. There's still that, comedic sensibility, but it's kind of been lowered down in the threshold to horror when they get to the Winchester, and then it's being overrun with zombies and all that. With this, it generally is more comedy runs throughout, and it's almost gleeful in the horror aspects a bit later on. I think the only thing that I can really say with this is it is just fun. It's just a fun film to watch. I would check it out. I believe it's coming to Shudder in America, but if you do have Sky Cinema, it's available now in the UK. Definitely worth a go, I would say. And if you like Nick Frost anyway, I'd definitely recommend it. I'm going to give it a solid 7 out of 10 for Getaway. Really enjoyed this one, more so than I was expecting. Especially when it said Sky Cinema Original. That's that's not normally a good indicator of the quality. And then finally on the reviews, 2024's Nosferatu is an American gothic horror film written and directed by Robert Eggers. It's a remake of F.W. Murnau's 1922 film Nosferatu, itself inspired by Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. The film stars Bill Skarsgård as the vampire Nosferatu, and Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp as the married Hutter couple, with Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Emma Corrin, Ralph Ineson, Simon McBurney and Willem Dafoe in supporting roles. Development began in 2015 when Eggers planned to make it his second film, describing it as a passion project, but he eventually opted to delay its production. Skarsgård and Depp were cast as leads in September 2022. Filming took place primarily at Barrandov Studios in Prague, Czech Republic, between February and May 2023. So there's quite a delay from production to release. So it was in post-production for quite a while, it would seem. So we've got a bit more of a plot on this one in terms of on Wikipedia. So don't worry, I won't go into heavy spoilers. I'll just talk about the opening segments, and then I'll kind of just go over, my usual review points. So in the early 1830s, a young girl, Ellen, pleads for the arrival of a supernatural being. Her cries awaken a mysterious creature who makes her pledge herself to him eternally. Years later, in winter of 1838, Ellen, now married, lives in the town of Wisburg, Germany, with her husband Thomas Hutter. To ensure financial security for the couple, Thomas accepts a commission from his employer, Herr Nock, to sell the decrepit home Schloss Grunwald to the reclusive Count Orlok. Ellen unsuccessfully begs Thomas to remain with her, as she is haunted by dreams of marrying Death himself and is disturbed by the pleasure it gives her. Thomas leaves her in the care of his wealthy friend Friedrich Harding, his pregnant wife Anna, and their young daughters. Arriving in Slovakia, Thomas is shunned by the local peasantry for associating with Orlok. That night, he witnesses them impaling an alleged vampire's corpse with a stake. The corpse jolts and vomits blood. The following morning, Thomas finds the village deserted. Exhausted from his journey, Thomas meets with the menacing Orlok in his castle and completes the property sale. Orlok angrily rebukes Thomas' inquiries about the villagers, and when Thomas cuts himself, he blacks out and later awakens to find bite marks on his chest. So, here we go. I've been hyped to watch this for quite a while. Went to see it, I think, on the second of January, and it's if you've seen any of Robert Eggers' previous films, they are art in terms of the composition, the framing, just everything in it. Like, he is a modern auteur, and I don't necessarily love all of his films I've watched. Like, The Northman is a film that I wasn't really that interested in the setup. I watched it and it was good, but it didn't necessarily blow my mind. It's not in the same way that The Witch did. Or more so, The Lighthouse. I think The Lighthouse, up until now, has been my favourite of his releases. That's probably up until Nosferatu. There are some genuinely quite unnerving moments. There's a particular moment before he gets to Count Orlok's castle where he is left on this road, which kind of comes to a fork in the road, trying to walk up towards where Count Orlok's castle is, before this ghostly horse-drawn carriage comes to collect him. And it's just like classic cinema, where you get these long sweeping moments with, drawn out shot of the carriage approaching the castle. We're not going for the modern action approach where the camera's swinging along and going at a fast pace and you can't focus on anything because everything's moving so quickly. Like, no, we are getting moments to build tension, to build like awe, shock and awe. And we do get that in this film. Now, not everything smashes it out the park for me. The appearance of Count Orlok is different to what I expect. Different from the 22 Nosferatu in the 1970. I think it was 1970. The Werner Herzog Nosferatu. So it doesn't look exactly like that, but on closer inspection, he is like a rotting creature. There are areas of his body where the skin is just sort of falling away. I think the main thing with the appearance is the Count Orlok character itself always looks so menacing. Long claw-like hands, like fingers on his hands. This white domed head with pointy ears, and the protruding two-fanged mouth. And we get the long-clawed hands in this. He does look really tall and menacing and creepy, but he does have this big old moustache. And I understand the moustache is period accurate for the location he comes from at that sort of time. And it does make sense. But I think I did keep hoping that that was like part of a disguise, or that we'd really get to see those terrifying fangs. Like, he doesn't look any less creepy in this. And there's one particular moment where you just think, oh shit, they went there. Okay, Jesus Christ. Yeah, it does manage to shock, I would say. And I definitely found myself a little bit creeped out in certain points. I think the acting in this is great. Bill Skarsgård's accent in this is brilliant. He is menacing, and there's even moments where we get the shadows moving on the wall, which is part of Nosferatu. We get this really great shot where there's this panning overhead shot of the town, and it's got that really great German architecture. But then you've got like this shadow of Nosferatu going over the town, which is, to emphasize the plague that's spreading from him. Really, really, really good stuff. Lily Rose Depp was brilliant in this. I'm not really familiar with her from anything, but she did great. Nicholas Hoult as well. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, he's all right in this. Ralph Ineson, we always love him. Willem Dafoe is being crazy Willem Dafoe. I didn't mind it, but he's a little bit hammy in places. Just a tad, I would say. But outside of that, this was just a tour de force. I certainly felt like it followed. Now, the one thing that I should say is, the day of watching this, I watched the Werner Herzog Nosferatu for the first time. Never seen it before, and the plot for a good chunk of that follows a good chunk of this follows that a bit more closely than the 1922 Nosferatu. I mean, they're similar films, but there's a few slight variations. It doesn't fully follow it, where one of the main characters has a particular transformation, but a large point of it, I was just like, probably wasn't a good idea to watch that prior to this, because it feels like I know the majority of where this is going to go. But it wasn't a really big detractor. I mean, that was my own fault. I've been meaning to watch the Werner Herzog adaptation for quite a while, but I've now seen all three, and I mean, the Werner Herzog's one's great. I love the 1922 Nosferatu because it's just so creepy. I think this is kind of now up there with it. I mean, they're all brilliant to varying extents, but I'm going to give 9 out of 10 to Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. If you haven't seen it yet, and if you're interested in watching it, definitely give it a watch. It's well worth a cinema trip or an IMAX. Certainly worth watching in the IMAX. I thought really, really good stuff. That is it, Ghouls and Fiends, for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Be sure to check us out on socials, X, TikTok, now Instagram as well. If you need any bookkeeping needs or things like that, self-assessment, head to T.S. Eliot Bookkeeping on socials or www.tseliot.co.uk and get in touch for a quote. There are our sponsors for the show. You got to throw that in there. And check them out on TikTok if you like dogs. Lots of dogs in advertising. Who doesn't like dogs? Not people I trust. Anyway, thank you very much for watching Ghouls and Fiends. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.